Hi, everybody. Tonight I'd like to take this opportunity to speak to you all about what I do. I'm a cultural geographer, which probably means nothing or everything to some of you. And geography is a discipline that, to put as lazily and pretentiously as possible, defies categorization. And that's not necessarily a good thing when your department is fighting to establish its presence in a STEM world. I'll address the topic of my talk today, which is symbolic gentrification. It's a term that I made up sort of while teaching a class in American popular culture. I spend a lot of time arguing that popular culture and geography are intimately connected. And on the subject, I understand the existence of copyright laws are a measure to protect intellectual property, which is of course how they've been couched by big business in an altruistic way. But it's really just them protecting their property. But for this slide, I need you guys to help me out and picture El Guapo from Three Amigos. If you've seen that movie, do me a favor and work with me. Picture El Guapo when I say that there are a plethora of case studies of the interaction between television and tourism. For example, I took these pictures of Walking Dead standees at a Welcome to Georgia welcome center on my way to Atlanta. And cases like this are going to become more common in the age of Netflix original programming, which oftentimes films in Georgia. So let's talk about gentrification now. So the term serves as a catch-all for the incursion of monetization of public space, or urban space, as geographers call it, revanchist urbanism. The incursion of wealth upon marginal spaces, and that's especially relevant here in Knoxville and here in Happy Holler. So it's important to keep in mind that a lot of gentrification is not a specifically urban land related thing. There's a lot of identity wrapped up in processes of gentrification and changing cities. I took this picture on U Street in DC a couple months ago because I was so overwhelmed by the complete genericness of this building that could be anywhere. So a lot of my new colleagues and friends are architects for a reason. Anyway, let's talk about Pierre Bourdieu, as you guys all are huge fans of his, I'm sure. His writings about symbolic capital, where he was afraid that class was going to be basically enforced by symbolic capital, and the idea of class and popular culture would be intimately connected, as you can see in that chart from Life magazine. Symbolic violence, on the other hand, which is basically a tacit sort of communication that you are a second-class citizen, you don't matter as much based on symbols in public. So like being a Native American in a country that have 20 million things named after Andrew Jackson. For one example. And that's not the only one. And across the pond in Liverpool, those of you probably know that, what's his first name? Penny, forget his first, anyway. He was a slave trader in Liverpool, and this is the only place in Liverpool left that has a slave trader's name on it. But this is where popular culture and history kind of duked it out in Popular Culture 1. So this is where I've arrived at symbolic gentrification. It mixes three of my favorite things: popular culture, urban geography, and that really cool, hot, sexy, critical social theory that all the celebrities are talking about. Bringing them together under the umbrella of symbolic gentrification. Anyway, so where did the inspiration come from? Like every trend in alternative music in the last 30 years, it came from the brain, or started in the brain, of a weirdo from Washington, D.C. Ian Svenonius, who played the pilot light recently, he wrote an essay about the gentrification of college radio by NPR, and it was no doubt influenced by his hometown, Washington, D.C., where NPR is based. So as cities are growth machines, cities reinvent themselves in segments to perpetuate and grow their land value. And the radio dial is another kind of virtual example of that. And it's not just neighborhood communities that gentrification breaks up, but communities that are virtual, people who kind of rallied around left of the dial stations back in the 80s. Speaking of the 80s, MTV, another really good example of symbolic gentrification, where it began as kind of an edgy art house element of pop culture that became super dominant in the mid-80s and then just shed music videos entirely because their real estate, aka airtime, was too valuable to basically give teenagers 8 chances per hour to change the channel. And the same thing happened with the comics page. Calvin and Hobbes, for example, which abruptly ended in 1995, is a really good case study because the fans of that strip don't know the struggle that Bill Watterson went through fighting with the syndicate who wanted to reduce the access to space that his comic strip had. Anyway, also, television can't be overlooked either. Frank's Place, which was the classic brilliant but canceled show starring Tim Reed and Daphne Maxwell, aka Aunt Viv #2 from Fresh Prince, didn't make it out of 1988 because CBS kept on moving it around. They didn't know how to market an unapologetically black show in the age of The Cosby Show, which, if looking back in retrospect, The Cosby Show gave racists a lot of fuel to say that racism was a thing of the past, that black people had access to everything that white people had because of The Cosby Show, that very myopic look. So the defense also of Confederate monuments coming from the All Lives Matter crowd is part and parcel of that. So anyway, where does this bring us? Let's see, December 2nd, 2016, the Ghost Ship, which is an arts collective in Oakland, burned down and took 36 lives with it. The singer-songwriter Kimya Dawson, who many of you know from the Juno soundtrack, sounded off about it. She says, "Our favorite places get turned into parking lots. So many clubs with their overhead and their staffs and their contract and their lack of inclusivity and lack of tolerance, they break you if you don't make them the money, because it's always about the money, the money. They will make you feel like a failure. So we meet underground where there isn't about success or failure." And that's the thing that really struck me about this. It's the intersection of symbolic gentrification with actual gentrification. And it doesn't take someone with a degree, like anyone who's into popular culture can figure out that spending money on art in the age where it's been systematically devalued by Spotify and Netflix is an inherently political act. So what am I trying to say in all of this? Well, I'm saying, first of all, because symbolic gentrification has shattered our attention spans, here's an adorable cat to get your attention back, specifically mine. And supporting your local scene can mean a lot of things, but it's not a coincidence that schools put arts on the chopping block first before anything when there are budgetary concerns. And we shouldn't accept that as normal. We shouldn't accept that as something that's just par for the course. So if you have the means, volunteer, defend the arts in public schools and your kids' programs, and also Central Cinema is right there. Anyway, just a plug. Thank you, bye.